Well, despite the fact that we took a week-long break in between recordings, this still feels like the fastest season that we've burned through yet. We are at the Season 7 finale. The penultimate season has wrapped. We are officially here. We are about to break through the barrier and cross to the final 6. We've been waiting for it all of the last year that we've been recording this, but we are here. We got to get this episode over with first. Season 7, Episode 7, entitled The Dragon and the Wolf. Pat, what do you have to say before we get started?
Hey, Dom, I think you and the Talkin TV family that's talking Thrones with us here tonight can agree that this should just be called The Dragon and the Dragon. This is the infamous...
Right? Are the wolves even necessary here?
No, I don't think so. It's the infamous, Bran saying, hey, maybe we should tell them, intercut to... They're already in bed.
Too late.
We're
already too late
man.
there.
What a sequence. Why they even
Crazy
do it,
stuff.
I don't know.
Crazy stuff. We're going to get to that scene and all of that and more in today's episode of Talkin' Thrones. Oh man, what a way to kick off the episode. Just it's kind of redundant where it's like the whole thing is this episode is supposed to be this great formation. They finally crossed over the barrier, Starks and Targaryens together again after hundreds of years. Then in comes Bran instead to be like, there might be a little wrinkle in that, because obviously, I mean, all jokes aside from the start of the episode, again, the whole thing that's established here, that is officially established as they've kind of been hinting at, as we've been building up for over the last couple of episodes, is that obviously this is where Jon and Daenerys officially solidify their relationship. And we've known all along that Jon is a Targaryen bastard at the very least. But the thing that's confirmed in this episode is that Jon is not a bastard in any reality like we originally thought. For the majority of the series, we thought that he was a Stark bastard, even though there were always seemed to be some sort of hidden mystery about whether that was true or not, going all the way back to the books. Then you have the revelation at the end of season 6 that confirms the R+L=J theory that Jon is Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark's child, supposedly out of wedlock. And then building off of the reveal of 2 episodes ago, Eastwatch, when Gilly discovers the recording of the annulment, it is revealed that Jon is not a bastard. He's actually a legitimized Targaryen in the eyes of the Seven, as Rhaegar Targaryen annulled his marriage to Elia Martell and then married Lyanna Stark in a secret ceremony, making him Daenerys's legal nephew, as well as technically having a greater claim to the throne than her, despite the fact that they're roughly the same age. I don't know what the exact difference is as far as when they were born, but they're supposed to be roughly around the same age is the thing. So
yeah, I think we jumped into this and we might as well talk about it.
I mean, we may as well talk about it now because it's kind of the centerfold, which is crazy because we haven't talked about the whole crazy meeting of the minds that happens at the beginning of the episode. But
but the main thing is, I think it's the best use of Bran since he's been back from north of the wall. He's omniscient Bran, right? And he's the robotic, creepy guy that knows everything, and he says exactly what needs to be said. It's cool and everything, but I've been saying I want more. I want more of the magic. I want more of how the the stew is made, so to speak. And they gave it to us. This is the moment, right? Because Sam comes in and he's like, "Yeah, I'm a great guy," and Bran is like,
well, they have a little bit of a back and forth first, where Bran recognizes him instantly, and he's like, I didn't think that you would remember me," and he's like, "I remember everything now," and it's like, okay, we get it now. Come on, dude.
It starts off with the creepiness, but then obviously
you pull the layers back and you're almost like, oh wait, Bran sort of has a soul again. He's like, we need to tell Jon. He's like, he is actually Rhaegar and Lyanna's son, a bastard son. And Sam's like, he's not a bastard though.
Exactly. And I think this is what I like is, he's not a Snow, he's a Sand. And then, Sam just kind of pipes up and he's like, you're wrong. It's like, what?
It's like for all of your all-seeing and all-knowing abilities, I've got this one crucial bit of information.
This is the thing is Bran has the ability, but he didn't have the full time to suck it all in, right? So it's a universe of possibilities. And this is the first scene where we see him sort of, with these great powers, but he's in a spot where he's blindsided. And I think that's what makes that character interesting. Too bad we don't get any more of that for the rest of the series.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But like, it's
until he's crowned king somehow out of nowhere.
But Bran should be like, trying to use his abilities and having some flaws and pitfalls and not necessarily, obviously giving Arya the dagger, which, we see in this episode how it's used. And that's kind of like supposed to be a red herring to keep us from knowing how she's really going to use the dagger. But the fact is, I think it just shows Bran. And the fact that, Sam is like, oh, you can't see that. And then it cuts to him in the past and he's like, you're damn right, this happened. The fact that he knows how to find the event and see it and witness it. The fact that, and from a storytelling point of view, revealing the information to the audience and using his power to sort of show us that moment and show us, who John Foley is. It's not just something where, Gilly read it in a book and then we, the audience, are told. We could have pieced things together at that point. But this is something where we're visually showed Bran searching through these visions to confirm it to himself so that he can sort of, plan how to use that information in his kind of grand scheme of things, since he can see all of history. Right. So it's a cool scene. And it's intercut with the John and Daenerys.
The sex scene intercut, like that was kind of it was criticized.
I was gonna say romance just to keep it a little
I don't know. It's almost
classy,
kind of funny. It's almost kind of funny in hindsight now. Like just looking at it, it's like, with the fact that these two are boning right on top of this reveal that they're related. Oh man, what a crazy coincidence there.
I usually kind of chastise you for using those terms, but
usually.
I think it's the perfect term for like sort of the maturity level of the creators of the show, because this is totally them just being like, oh, wouldn't it be ironic? They're like
as we saw from the first episode of this season, we know that stuff, that style, filmmaking styles like that are not beneath them, as we clearly know.
It's like they're like Beavis and Butthead in this moment, and same thing with the scene with Tywin when he walks into the throne room and they perfectly like have
and then they perfectly frame the horse taking a dump right there.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's that maturity level
the Beavis
that we're
and
used
Butthead
to
of prestige TV filmmaking. I love it.
Well,
we got to
feel
coin
like
it there.
there's a lot of intelligent things they do, so I don't want to discredit them totally. But there is sort of those moments throughout this series where it's like, like they're laughing like at the visual that they've created, and it's like, come on, guys. Do you really need that? Do we really need Bran to learn this information during their clear romance scene?
But the only thing that I feel like would make that better is if Bran saw them boning at the same time that he's seeing this revelation like that. I'm like, just the cherry.
Well, they might as well have made it creepy. He might as well have been there, like, oh,
right?
Yeah. and like rubbing his hands together. And it's like, it's like, I don't know, man. It's like he's already a creep for what he said to Sansa. It's like you might as well go all in and make him a full creep voyeur.
Beavis and Butthead was the last pop culture reference, like external pop culture reference that I was expecting on this show, but it makes it so satisfying nevertheless.
Yeah, hey, they did America, they did the universe. Now it's time for them to do Game of Thrones.
What was their new movie they just put out? Was that I don't remember. Was that them doing the universe, or was that something else?
Yeah, I was up on my Beavis and Butthead reference.
Okay, I wasn't sure. All right, so
hey, listen, I'm a '90s. I grew up in the '90s. It's not like I was born in the '90s.
Right, unlike me, who I was born at the back.
Yeah,
end
it's
of the 90s,
usually
so.
When the decade in which impacted you is
right.
the one in which you actually can remember. Not
right,
the
and
one
for me,
were,
that's without a doubt the 2000s and early 2010s. So.
Yeah, if you were in diapers, for
it doesn't really
count. 4 years,
3 years, 2 years actually, but no, it barely counts.
Whatever.
But
well, I'm not saying you're in diapers for that long. If you are, well,
that's a different story.
Okay.
But hey, so
I mean, as a young kid, you're not necessarily grokking the world fully. You know,
Right.
it's when you really get to your, I would say like 5 to 10, and maybe a little older, that you're starting to, really take in
Right. It's
pop
really start to take
culture,
in information and start
and
to
make it your own.
grow and
So
develop. Yeah.
yeah, so Beavis and Butthead was definitely one of those cartoons where it's like, I started understanding the world, and that's
Yeah.
not a lens you want to.
Definitely not. I'm of all the lenses that which you can understand the world. Beavis and Butthead is the last one that I would expect. So let's get to the summit. It's the thing that they were kind of centering the whole episode around. They said that they kind of had hinted by the midway 2 episodes ago in Eastwatch that they were kind of building to it. We didn't get any King's Landing in the last episode because they were kind of putzing around north of the wall, of dodging plot holes and dragons getting turned into White Walkers and chains and stuff like that. But they're finally here. They finally arrived. It's a meeting of the minds. It's like almost every single, at least a majority of like almost every single major character that's been established up to this point. Like you got obviously Jon, Tyrion, Daenerys, Theon, Jorah, Varys, Bran, Podrick, Jaime, Cersei, Euron, the Hound, the Mountain, Brienne. Like they're all here. They're all in this one spot. So it's almost like continuing off of what we were talking about with last week's episode, where you just get all these reunions, all these characters coming, meeting back up for the first time in a long, long time. You have the brief opening exchange where it's like, oh, more fun in games with Jaime and Bran, because the Unsullied from all the way back in Queen's Justice, when they were stranded on the other side of the continent by Euron's fleet, they've arrived. The Dothraki have arrived. Jaime's already getting flashbacks. It's like, oh man, this is just kind of a signifier to show. It's like, man, this is what's gonna happen if this goes wrong in any way, shape, or form. It's like, let's hope this doesn't happen. We got a couple of opening banter there with Tyrion reuniting with Podrick and Bran. They have some choice words for each other. Brienne reuniting with the Hound. I think they have a really nice moment where they're kind of talking about Arya and how they both kind of were only looking out for her best interests, and so they have a nice moment to make up.
I thought that moment was great because it was, doesn't the Hound say something to the effect of like, who's going to protect her? And it's like, she'll run you down if you get in her way.
Right. It's like, I fear for the person who's going to get in her way. And he's like, well, it won't be me.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was a great moment. And, hey, the main thing I was going to say is like, this is the who's who of who's in King's Landing. And,
oh yeah.
If you're not in King's Landing, there's like a
Davos. He's there too. I forgot about him after he sat out the mission north of the wall.
Out of the main characters, right, that are not necessarily in King's Landing.
Right. It's not many left. Like,
there's three that are not there, right? Sansa, Arya, and
it's technically 5. So we got the 4 that are in Winterfell: Sansa, Bran, Arya, Littlefinger, if you still even count him, and then Sam obviously makes his way by the end of the episode. And then Tormund and Beric are still up at the wall for now.
Gotcha. I was gonna just say, like, if you're not in King's Landing, that increases your chances of death.
If you're not dead, unless you're dead already, in that case.
Yeah, I guess if there's 5 other main characters, then it's a 20% chance.
Yeah, then it's 20% chance. Yeah, but so that they all meet up, they all come to the Dragon Pit, which is like, that's the one thing that is confusing. It's like, so this is the first sight that we see of the Dragon Pit, where again that was kind of the place where they kept the dragons. Obviously, again, more ties to House of the Dragon. I wonder if they had already been planning on setting up for that. But they obviously talk about a little bit of the history of the Targaryens keeping the dragons there, and how the fact that because they kept the dragons chained up for so long, by the time they finally, the last dragon died, whatever that was, it was like they were as small as kittens, because the dragons, the whole thing is they kind of, the whole thing about the dragons is that as long as they're kept loose, they roam, they can grow as large as who knows what. But the whole thing is that if they're kept in chains, that they won't grow. I think that's kind of interesting and fascinating, that little metaphor there. As far as this being a place that symbolizes both growth and death as well. The back and forth between Tyrion and the Hound, when he's just like, I left the shit city because I didn't want to die here, and now I'm here. It seems like there's always everything bad that happens here is always because of some Lannister, whatever. And he's like, and Tyrion fires back, is like, and some Clegane, to carry it out as they arrive. They arrive in the summit. Daenerys isn't there yet. She's got to make the showy entrance of the dragon. I just love the ultimate cojones where she shows up at the dragon, has the dragon roar, she walks up, and Cersei is just like, oh, I'm not cowed, but it's like, I'm not intimidated. And it's like, oh, we've been waiting for some time now. I just thought that was hilarious.
Listen, I think Cersei, and the way that it's played, right? The way the character's written and the way that Lena Headey does it, it's the best, same thing with Daenerys and Emilia Clarke. Like, the two of them are queens in their own right.
Yes.
And
they have definitely fully earned those titles, both of them.
They will not lower themselves beneath the other. And I think that kind of petty back and forth between the two of them is really good. It's kind of like some of the other, back and forth dialogue. We were talking about, the Hound and Tormund, going beyond the wall last episode when they were talking about Brienne and being, gruff guys talking about, this tall woman, and Tormund's like, I'm gonna make monster babies to rule the world with her. It's like that dialogue is perfect for these kind of crazy, warriors who are, on the front line and can die in any battle.
Right.
And then here you are, two queens, just going back and forth and not letting one of them get a heads up on the other. And it's, just they are always, the writing room for this show is kind of always at least on par, knows who their characters are. We can argue whether or not their pacing is perfect, but I think for the most part, it's like this is one of those scenes where we see like everything firing and all.
100%. You got a brief insert there of like setting up for the Clegane Bowl with the Hound coming up to the mountain and just staring him down before he goes to get the soldier.
Personally, it should have happened right here.
It should have happened right here. It's like, well, I don't understand the need to like just throw it in randomly in the bells. Like it sticks out like a sore thumb. But
when Jon says like, hey, I've already bent the knee, blah blah blah, and Cersei's whatever, it's like, hey, let's do it the old way, trial by combat.
Trial by combat right here. And you also want to talk about petty back and forth as well. Euron just insulting the ever-living shit out of Tyrion for like no reason at all, as like a continuation of like the dwarf jokes thing from last season with Theon. And it's like, what is the reason for this? Like the talking Theon, that makes sense, but like Tyrion, like.
Well, Euron gets up and before he even gets up to address Tyrion, but he's basically telling Theon like, you better surrender now or I kill your sister. And, that leads to Tyrion kind of moving on with his presentation. He has everything but a PowerPoint ready to go, which was a weird, I felt like this was very strange. Like it was almost like boardroom-esque how they were presenting this to Cersei. So the thing is, like, Euron gets in his face and is talking about his stature and all this stuff, and really is relentless against the enemy. He's sort of like an attack dog that needs his leash pulled back.
Right.
Jaime tries.
Ironically
to pull him
enough,
back.
that doesn't work. And Cersei finally tells him to sit down.
And then Cersei, so it's. Again, it's a moment where it shows you just like that he's a loose cannon, that Jaime has no say or control in the situation, and Cersei has the ultimate say. And I think setting up that dynamic and literally showing it to Daenerys and Tyrion and the gang, so to speak. I think that's really smart. In terms of the writing, it's just. You're getting the sense that this ain't going to be an easy conversation to have about the dead.
Right, for sure. And like I said, there's just more bickering, more bantering, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. They're comparing like, previous instances, blah, 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 blah. And they're finally like, and Tyrion's finally like, look, this is going to go nowhere. We have to, we're here to show you this. And the Hound brings out the crate. I like the subtle build up too, where it's like, he's shaking the crate. He's not sure if he's making sure that he's kind of still alive there. I also love the statement before when they were first arriving and the Hound's like, okay, anybody who touches that box, I'm going to kill them. So better not. And, what's it called? And so he has to like pulls off the crate like ever slowly, like he seems nervous, like they're really building up the tension there, and he finally kicks it over and sends the creature, and it just the undead soldier just goes running right at Cersei, and like I love everyone's reaction. It like gets right up close and personal to her face before it runs back at the Hound and he slices it in half. It's a great
thing
scene.
Is like he had that box open for like 2 minutes before he kicked it open. So
right, we'll kick it over. Yeah.
My curiosity is like, why didn't the zombie just
maybe the sun? Maybe the sun was shining right in its eyes, and it had never seen sunlight because it had spent all of its like undead existence north of the wall. So that's the only thing I can think of.
Man, you explained it away pretty easily. I guess for me,
I don't know. That's just a thought. I'm not saying there's any reason for it. There's no reason for it. It should have jumped out of the crate as soon as it should have been shaking in that crate as soon as he brought it up. Like, no
exactly.
Reason why
I'm watching it, and I'm just like, wow, this is definitely for dramatic effect, but this would not be what's happening.
Not at all.
But I really love from the moment he kicks it over and the zombie runs at Cersei, from that moment to, just the end of them, sort of saying, like, what is it? Qyburn
Right.
walks over to the
And of course,
hand.
Qyburn walks over and he's already examining the hand, and Jon just grabs it from him like subconsciously.
Exactly.
And it's like Davos' only role in the episode is to come up and just help Jon light the torch so that he can demonstrate. It's like, yeah, this is how we kill him.
Well,
Fire
again,
and dragon glass.
it's like a corporate board meeting. They all had their roles. They rehearsed it beforehand. Everything is laid out perfectly, like it's a 2022 corporate PowerPoint meeting.
Right. The only thing that's missing is Zoom.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I guess they.
Oh man, could you imagine how much easier it would have been if they could have literally just like flown the dragon with oh my god, one of those mini with like a GoPro up north of the wall, just filmed the army of the dead and just live streamed it.
Well, they could have done that, but also I'm thinking more like Daenerys would have a dragon filter on and just say I'm not a dragon. But I think all jokes aside, this sequence is really good because the zombie runs.
Right.
Obviously, the hound fights it and chops it to bits, and it's crawling around. Qyburn has the hand, and he's interested because that's the type of guy he is. And they, the moment's like, we can burn it or we can kill it with dragon glass.
It's a great visual display of the enemy, and it's a great. It's where Jon finally has the proof that he wishes he had, like at the beginning of the season. It's like, yeah, guess what? You decide to sit here. That right there is going to be the fate of every single last man, woman, and child left in King's Landing. The only problem here is, again, this is Cersei Lannister that he's dealing with. So now my question is that so Cersei states that she's going to ally with them as long as Jon, because the whole consensus that they come to is that it's like, okay, I'll lay down my arms and assist you guys in the fight with the army of the dead, as long as but we know that the war is going to resume once because she's like, yeah, well, you can't expect the stalemate to go on forever. She's like, yeah, naturally the war is going to resume once the dead have been dealt with. So her whole thing is, it's like, okay, so as long as Jon and the King of the North remains neutral while we fight this out, it's all gravy. And then Jon stupidly says, oh, I've already declared for Daenerys.
Well,
it's like,
the main thing is, like, they agree that Jon will sit it out.
Right.
But then Cersei says, you need to bend your knee to me.
Right.
And that's the part where he disagrees, because he already made an oath to Daenerys. So,
right.
He tells the truth, and everybody, like, Cersei storms out, and everybody hates him for it. He's like,
right.
Tyrion's line where it's like,
what's
you ever
crazy?
thought of learning how to lie
for once? Like Jon's explanation for it, it's like, oh, we got to stop lying at some point. It's like, okay, good, go back to the
Well,
North,
I think that has to do with people, right?
Well, that has to do with people. It has to do with the original trajectory, the original mission of the North. It's like, yeah, we set out to restore honor to this land. Clearly that hasn't worked out so well.
If one person lies, that leads the next person to lie, which then means it's no longer about honor. It's all about how good is the next lie. And it's just his mindset of like, we need to get away from all that. And, I think that's kind of, Daenerys wants to break the wheel. He wants to, stop this circle of lying. So, I think they're peppering in the fact that his performance in front of Cersei and his motivations and all that type of stuff is something that, Daenerys is going to deeply respect. And it's kind of building up for their night of passion, which happens to be Beavis and Butthead.
Right, which happens to be Beavis and Butthead too in the universe. See in the universe, but
yeah. So whatever. But it is well constructed in terms of what leads up to that moment.
Right.
And I guess I keep calling it Beavis and Butthead. It's really just it's very melodramatic.
Right.
And this show historically, I don't think it usually ends up in that melodrama area. It's usually, it could be suspenseful, it could be dramatic, it can be whatever, but it's not usually coincided with the melodramatic after school special.
Well, so here's my question though, is that the whole consensus is that Cersei is gonna ally with them supposedly. I mean, it's never really made clear, at least. But so her whole thing is like, so she's gonna ally with them, whatever, on the impetus that Jon bends the knee to her. But then Jon admits, obviously, loyalty to Daenerys, and it's not until Tyrion goes and has the one-on-one conversation with her that she then states that she's gonna send the Lannister armies north. But then she reveals after the fact that she was always planning on keeping the armies there and letting them fight it out with the dead. Now that she's seen them, so my question is, do you think that she was? That was the thing that immediately entered her mind once she saw the dead soldier, or do you think that's something that she was more so conceiving of as she was conversing with Tyrion, and then after they had already left? Like, when do you think that decision to ultimately keep their forces in King's Landing and screw over everyone takes place?
Well, I think ultimately, at first she was like, "Well, I don't need to help them." I obviously geolocation is in her favor
Right,
in
very
terms of
much
the
so.
army of the dead. And then Tyrion obviously goes to chat with her.
Right,
And I think it's one of those things where she probably developed in her mind this idea of sort of lying to them and presenting a false hope so that they would just kind of leave and go back and fight the Night King. And I think it's to really back them into a corner where they feel they have no choice. So I think her decision is sort of a calculating one that is like, you know what, I probably don't need to send my troops. We could probably just let them die,
right.
and then we'll figure it out afterwards.
Well, because
So
the
I
whole
don't think she naturally like sees this creature
right.
and conceives of all this. I think it's the fact that she didn't get what she wanted in the negotiations. Tyrion comes back and pushes hard, and she realizes that they're kind of serious. They're not going to really leave this place with a no for an answer.
Right.
So I
Right,
think,
and that's kind of the purpose of the Tyrion sequence. But like, I think the thing that's so brilliant about the Tyrion sequence is the fact that she is still like it is a battle between the manipulators. We always know that again. Cersei and Tyrion have always been the two smartest ones in their family. They are the one. They're kind of the two opposite ends of Tywin. Cersei is the cunning, and Tyrion is the logical side. Again, put them together, it's Tywin Lannister right there. And it's the fact that again, it was the thing that was always so interesting about their relationship way back when they were first in King's Landing, back in seasons 2 and 3. Is the fact that it's like if they could just put their petty sibling differences and indifferences aside and all the hurt and harm and torture that they mutually did to each other growing up, then man, they can accomplish some wonders together. And this is like kind of Tyrion's last foot forward that he's really trying to put out there for Cersei. And Cersei is still manipulating him, with the whole grabbing her stomach and everything. And Tyrion's able to figure out that she's pregnant, realizing that he's like, Cersei would not be doing the things that she would be doing unless that there is something to live for. And he knows that that's not Jaime at the end. So he's able to put 2 and 2 together that she's pregnant. I'm still not sure whether she was serious about the pregnancy or not, but I'm assuming that she is, considering how emotional she is.
Do they explore it any further in the?
They never do. The
season?
only thing that comes from it is the fact that when the castle's crumbling around them in the bells next season, and she's crying and realizing, oh man, maybe this whole screwing all of these people with dragons and all these people that could have very easily killed us over, maybe screwing them over and raging them to the point where they were going to attack. Maybe that wasn't a good idea, And she kind of is having that realization, and she just says to Jaime, "I want our baby to live." That's the only indication that we have that it's actually real and that it's not made up.
Yeah. So I vaguely remember it. I can't wait till we actually see it. But,
yeah, that's going to be an interesting episode.
Based on what you're saying, I would have to believe that this is a storyline because for a second you're talking about how she's a master manipulator, and
right.
It's like I just watched the scene today, so it's
right.
Essentially her kind of grabbing her stomach and
right.
making these overtures.
But like the signs are all there. Like that's
exactly,
the brilliant thing about the scene is it could be read in any context, whether she is actually feeling the things that she's stating towards Tyrion, which because that she means, that's the thing that always makes manipulators so good at what they do, is there's always some element of truth in what they're saying, even if it's not what they're actually intended to say, which is everything that she says about Tyrion leaving them vulnerable was 100% true, where she's like, yeah, you killing father, you left us open, you left us vulnerable, you intentionally kind of contributed to the destruction of our house that's left us where we are, So so Cersei does have legitimate beef with Tyrion, despite the fact that she hates him and she does want him dead, and vice versa.
Also, it could, I'm just hung up on the pregnancy thing because, it could very well be, the trauma of having her children die the way they did is like, this is sort of like her just, wishing she was pregnant.
Right.
And then flash forward to, Jaime and whatnot, and she's saying, oh, hey, I just want our child to live.
Right.
That could be one last manipulation where she's sort of giving him, like hope that things could have been better if they weren't in this situation right now.
Right.
Just before they kind of die. I think it could be played either way. I think like a lot of the storylines late in the show, it's kind of like leaves you to think, and things are not really like spelled out.
Right.
And, that's okay.
Right.
Your audience can
If
kind
it's
of
done
dwell
well,
on
if it's executed
it.
well in a really resolutionary standpoint, it doesn't necessarily need to over-explain everything. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna get to it when we cover the final 6, but now that we're so close. But there's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
will
stuff that I think
say,
the Bells does really, really well and
I will
really
say,
effectively.
like, this scene here in this episode where kind of Tyrion, oh, you're pregnant. I think the fact that you can read it either way, like she's kind of just like, really is, having him eat out of her hand and she's manipulating him every step of the way. I think you could totally believe that. I think you could totally
Right.
believe that she is pregnant.
Right. It's
But
totally
ultimately,
it's one of the, put it this way, it's one of the few instances where we can buy into Tyrion getting hoodwinked. Like we've been criticizing Tyrion over the last couple seasons about all of a sudden now we kind of just became a moron out of nowhere and has made some very, very stupid decisions. Like I said, but the thing that I think is kind of excusing him this season is the fact that now more than ever, because he is home for the first time in 2 seasons, he is being like kind of emotionally deluded by the fact that at the end of the day, he doesn't really want the rest of his family to die, especially since now Jaime and Cersei are the only other Lannisters left alive besides him. Every other Lannister by that point is dead, So there's obviously that instance. And so it makes sense in this sequence why, regardless of what Cersei's motivation is, why Tyrion falls for it and does legitimately believe her, because he wants to believe that she wants their whole family to live as much as he does.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to say this to wrap up this particular subject is I think this scene has depth. I think it's really important and key to this finale. And it just really, there's so many good aspects of this episode. And I think this scene sort of, floats to the top. So
100%.
That's kind of the last thing I have to say.
Well, the only other sequence that really we should talk about in King's Landing is the final moment between Jaime and Cersei when Cersei ultimately reveals the duplicity as Jaime is getting the armies ready to leave. And Jaime brings up a lot of legitimate points where it's like, again, Jaime has been kind of, it's been what I think has been so interesting about Jaime and Cersei's dynamic this season is where they were so staunchly allied for the last 2 seasons against the Sparrows and everything. Well, first she sent him on that fool's errand to save Myrcella, and then they were kind of teamed up to save the Sparrows, and then she sent him away again so that he could, Jaime is finally starting to wake up to the fact that Cersei is just using him, and Olenna's words are ringing true, where he realizes that Cersei's actions will ultimately get them all killed, which is that it's like, he breaks it down. It's like, look, regardless of how you think that this decision is going to benefit us, this is a no-win scenario. It's like, because whatever happens in the north, if the dead win, they come south and we're all dead. And if they win, they're going to realize we screwed them over and they're going to turn right around and come back and kill us. And she's like, oh, we'll be able to fight them. And she's like, we can't. And he just says the same point for 2 episodes. He's like, we can't beat the Dothraki or the dragons. And she brings up, it's like, what happened to the third dragon? Where she noticed, again, it's just Cersei's hubris and thinking that she is all that, where she's like, oh, she saw that there was only 2 dragons in the sky, not the third. She's like, something happened to it. She's like, they wouldn't, because props to her on being able to guess this. It's like, they wouldn't be making this claim if something had happened. She's like, something happened up north and to that dragon. And so she, whatever that is, whatever it is, she is so deluded to the point now where she is like, okay, whatever sort of weakness they have, we're going to use that to their advantage. And then she does the reveal of, it's like, oh, she's like, we don't even if we could fight, we don't have an army. And she's like, no, we do have an army. We have the Golden Company, where she reveals that, oh, Euron's big show during the meeting where it's like, oh, I'm terrified of these things and I'm taking my fleet back to the Iron Island. That was all just a show of where it's like, no, Euron's actually just ferrying over the Golden Company, which they paid for with the Tyrell gold. And it's like, and he's like, okay, first of all, thanks for telling me. Second of all,
well, it's one of those things
us?
where
a mercenary army, that's our means of survival.
He complains, why didn't you tell me about this before? And she accuses him of being conspiratorial against her, just for having a conversation with Tyrion,
right,
and setting up this whole situation where they're showing her the zombies. So
right.
I think it's one of those things where she is very laser focused on what she wants, which is absolute dominance. And yeah, she is just looking for the pathway to that. She's not willing to listen to anything else. And, again, I think it comes down to the traumatic experience of losing her 3 children, she has nothing to live for anymore.
Right.
And it's like the whole
And
idea
your
of
point
like,
that you brought up about like her maybe like having conceived like her deluding herself into thinking that she is pregnant regardless of whether she actually is or not, like is a sound theory where it's like, yeah, it could be just another delusion.
I think it makes her character a lot better.
Yeah.
If she's obviously, she could be, because Jaime and her definitely had a couple romance scenes together. But the fact is, I think it just works in the character's tragic arc from beginning of the show to the end of the show. If she is now in a sort of delusional state, and the things that she's doing is for this child that she is imagining or just like believes is going to be there. And I don't know, it's one of those things where with Cersei, I think it's open ended enough where you can kind of just explore in your mind,
right?
Hey, could this be
right? Exactly.
Maybe so, maybe not.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows? But yeah, the one tiny nitpick that I do have, and like I think it's a great symbolic scene where the last shot that we see of Jaime riding out of the city to continue to ride north and help them is we see the snow finally coming onto King's Landing. I think you have this great ominous shot of like all the scenes where we've been throughout the Red Keep and throughout this season, and we see the snows finally descending on the city. But then we cut to King's Landing the next season and it's sunny and bright again. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that was just there for visual display. And like, it's the snows are never actually going to come to King's Landing.
Yeah,
like,
okay, it was a little,
it was a sprinkle.
one day
it was a
flurry.
Slight overcast.
Yeah,
a slight overcast, slight discrepancy on the weather. I don't know. Anyways, let's get to the place where there actually is weather. Let's cut to the Winterfell. Let's wrap up the Winterfell back and forth arc. So like I said, we talked last episode
is
about
there much to wrap up here? There's
yeah.
Maybe the body after.
We already talked about the Bran Sam sequence, so we're not going to be repetitive and talk about that. Obviously,
so
it's
we
the
covered
build
that.
to the Littlefinger. So obviously, again, it's the wrap up, it's the resolution of the whole Sansa Arya thing. And you talked about last episode how the giant flaw of this whole storyline is the fact that their dynamic, their back and forth, is so good, building off the fact that they're finally reunited for the first time in 6-7 seasons, whatever it was since the last time they saw each other, and they are quickly able to realize that Littlefinger has been hoodwinking them and then they're best buddies. And that kind of causes the whole thing to unravel. And I have one other thing to add to that, but like I just wanted your take on like now that we're actually at the episode as far as how the sequence builds out. It's only to build up to the gotcha moment where Sansa supposedly has Arya on trial, that she turns to Littlefinger and is like, oh, so what do you have to say to answer to your treason, Lord Baelish? And it's like, and he's just like, what? Like,
listen, I actually love this scene. I just don't like. I just don't like the fact that from this point on, like season 8, the two of them are like peas and carrots. They're just snug together with warm butter. On Sunday
birds of a feather flock together. All of the above.
But the fact of the matter is, like this could have gone on for the rest of the series. Like, they realized that Littlefinger was trying to play them, and they outsmarted him. But you could basically keep the tension between the two of them for other reasons,
right?
And kind of have
no
that,
reason
like,
why they had to instantly make up once they realized that Littlefinger was breaking them apart. I mean, they have that statement at the end of on the parapets, very similar to Jon and Sansa's final scene at the end of season 6, where they have that moment of it's like, oh, the lone wolf dies and the pack survives, all that. But it's like that could have also just easily been a red herring, where it's like Sansa could have continued criticizing Arya, could have continued criticizing Sansa for her what's it called? For her, grasping at power and undermining Jon and all that. Like, it would have been interesting. I feel like it almost would have been interesting if Arya had been supportive of Jon and trusting in Daenerys until she follows Jon south. And that could have been another source of tension between Sansa and Arya until she follows Jon south and witnesses the carnage and destruction and realizes that Sansa's been right this whole time about Daenerys. I feel like that could have been really interesting as well.
Yeah, listen, to me, siblings don't always grow up to be best pals. Like, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. There are things that cause them to grow apart. And I think they totally laid that groundwork between Sansa and Arya. So despite the fact that they were able to come together for a righteous cause and something that they should have came together for,
and a little bit of plot armor and a little bit of like the fact that they've got like the keeper of all knowledge on their side too.
But they got to get rid of Lord Baelish, and it makes sense that they would come together and do this. But then afterwards, they could have still criticized each other, like you said.
Right.
And it could have.
They could have come to like a mutual understanding for the time being, having overcome this conflict of Littlefinger, and then once Jon arrives with Daenerys in the next episode, that could have caused a whole new conflict between them. Like there didn't need to be like kind of this bow placed on it.
We've definitely hashed this over in a lot of our episodes where, the two of us are thinking in that novelist, thinking where it's like we want, really a lot of description. We want to be inside the minds of the characters. We want these kind of natural progressions, and for the sake of TV, it's very streamlined, and that's what we got here. It's just one of those storylines that you wish there could have been some sort of thread that continues into season 8 with this sort of like sibling against sibling. It just doesn't happen. Other than that, I thought this scene was really good. I thought, Sansa sort of turning to Baelish, and Baelish.
Oh, so
what
good.
do you mean? Like,
it's like, what do you mean? And then Brad's like, oh, you placed a knife on it. You held him at knife point. When you betrayed our father.
Listen, Bran is on point this episode because it's like, who was there to see it?
Yeah, and he's like, no one was there, no one saw it, and Brad's like, oh well, funny you should mention that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's it's another great use of Bran's power. It's a little bit odd because everyone in the hall sort of just watches and accepts.
Yeah, everyone else is just kind of going along with it. They're like,
so Bran, Sansa, and Arya literally just decide to murder Lord Baelish.
Well, I mean,
and everybody's like
nobody really. It's kind of the underlying fact of like everyone was kind of already done with Littlefinger. Like you could tell specifically with Royce. Like Royce had been looking for some excuse to get rid of Littlefinger because he probably always had that suspicion where it's like, yeah, the fact that Littlefinger was in the room when Lysa died, like there was always something that wasn't right about that story too. But
I guess, if I'm changing the scene a little bit, when Lord Baelish goes up to him and, he's saying, hey, take me back. It's like, he should be like, I want to present evidence at this trial. This is what I believe to be true and what Lord Baelish did.
Right, and that would also implicate Sansa, the fact that she covered up for Littlefinger originally back when he did kill Lysa. I know all of a sudden now it's like, oh, so now you're saying that he killed her,
Yeah, like, well, he should have done that. He should have looked at. It should have been like a double fake. Like,
right. I'm surprised he didn't bring that up. Where it's like, oh, I seem to recall you, backing me up and saying that, oh, Lysa killed herself, not that I killed her.
Yeah, but then what's his name? Our good fellow knight here.
You're right, Lord Royce.
Yeah, Royce just goes. It's like, but I understand considering what he did. He sold you to the Boltons.
Right.
Like he had you on.
Right. He had you in a chokehold.
Exactly. So like that sequence could have expanded. Like the way the sequence is basically Bran, Arya, and Sansa conspire to kill Lord Baelish. And everyone just kind of watches it.
Right. And everyone's just kind of like, oh, okay, we don't like Littlefinger. Guess he's
exactly.
Gone now.
It to me, like watching it this time, it was like, these three lords, they just literally seize power on like their 21st birthday, and it's like, oh, hey, their justice.
Wow.
Their justice is a little swift.
Yeah, a little weird there. The ruler of Winterfell. Yeah.
So it's like the scene is like, at one hand, I know they're not trying to betray the three of them as rushing to justice. They do make a compelling argument against Lord Baelish. Sure. But I think there could have been some supporting cast members like Royce who sort of back the notion that this guy should have his throat slit.
Yeah, for sure. And not just kind of rely on the fact that it's like, oh, the audience is kind of all knows that Littlefinger has deserved this for some time now. Yeah, and it's like,
they should have just had a Lady Mormont and,
Lady Mormont would have chewed his head off just happily, just if they let him,
and one of the Umbers or whatever in the room, and it should have been like that scene from Friday where they're like, damn, you could have taken the scene. Pop culture
references are killing me.
I'm sorry, man, but
it's great. I love it.
There's something about this scene that it is well constructed, but at the same time,
it is well constructed, but it feels like there's something missing. So, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because I feel like that's a perfect segue. I've been hinting it up for 2 episodes now. the deleted scene that I've been talking about, which is where there were probably many outtakes from this sequence that could have helped flesh this out further and made this into something really interesting rather than just kind of cut and dry. Okay, we need to get past this. It is what it is, you know?
Well, the episode was an hour and 20 minutes. So
it was an hour. It was an hour and 20 minutes long.
They needed some deleted scenes.
So there was a deleted scene that showed where Sansa, because again, that's the whole thing that sells the scene, is the fact that you go into this scene thinking that Littlefinger has convinced Sansa that Arya is a threat and is going to have Arya executed. And there was a deleted scene in which she, still not sure of whether to trust Littlefinger, even though she should have absolutely no reason to trust Littlefinger at this point. She goes and visits with Bran privately, and Bran is able to tell her about him seeing Littlefinger betraying Ned back in season 1, and that's what leads her to realize that he's manipulating her. And that was the scene that was cut here. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, did we need this scene? Not entirely sure. We probably could have just fleshed it out further, added some more sequence to the actual trial. Like, I feel like it would have been better. Like, them ultimately withholding it, I understand the decision why, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it's like Sansa should know better at this point, ultimately, that like she should know better than to trust Littlefinger, especially because at the beginning of the season, she was so confident in her ability to kind of have Littlefinger under her thumb that it's like,
well, you know, I didn't see the scene. I didn't do my homework like I told our audience to do. You know, it's probably a simple Google search.
I don't even think it's available to watch online. It's one of those things where it's like,
really?
I think they filmed it, but then it didn't even make the cutting room floor. Like, it's not even on like their deleted scenes, like extras or anything like that.
So it's no footage has hit the internet.
No footage. It's literally only like you read about. Like that was the whole thing, is that because a
so
lot of
like
people
an interview or something like
that. Like, yeah. Well, Benioff and Weiss were talking in the behind the scenes thing of it's like people felt that it's like, okay, that Sansa's flip of a switch to all of a sudden realize that Littlefinger was behind this kind of comes out of nowhere, and they're like, yeah, because there was a scene that we originally had conceived where Sansa goes to see Bran, because a lot of people at the internet were rightfully saying they're like Sansa, talk to Bran. He'll easily be able to set things straight here, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I could totally see a scene between Sansa and Bran,
right?
Being too on the nose, sort of like, hey, you know, Littlefinger is bad, you know, and then
that really kinda, no shit.
Yeah,
no
that kind of would diffuse the drama, you know, the suspense. But you could have also had that scene be very like Bran's choice with his words, and leave Sansa, you know, oh, she needs to make a decision either way. Almost like he's kind of hands off. He doesn't want to influence the decision.
Right.
Like that could have been a cool scene.
Yeah, definitely. It could have been interesting, but at the end of the day, like I said, the scene is what it is. It could have used a little bit of extras, but it accomplished it. Littlefinger's dead. He's gone. He finally suffered the consequences for his many betrayals.
Brutal
way to go too. Where it's like I feel like even by a typical Game of Thrones throat cutting comparisons, I feel like that was slightly tame. I don't know. That might just be me, just because I'm so conditioned to the vast amounts of crazy violence.
Dude, they had a voice actor come in and like gargle some water to simulate the blood. It like, oh my god, the sound effect was crazy. You know, it's like, what a way.
Yeah.
Dies from the dagger that he used to betray the Starks and tried to kill Bran with in the first place. And you know, this is ultimately, you know, why did Bran give Arya that dagger in the first place?
Right.
You know, well, we all know, if you've seen the show, it's for her to jump out of the woodwork and kill the Night King. But the fact is, this particular sequence right here is sort of the red herring. It's sort of like, okay, that's why Bran gave her the dagger, is because of the execution of Lord Baelish. So, you know, hopefully going forward, they kind of hid their tracks, right? You know, they kind of set up, you know, how they're going to dispense of the Night King, and they have it justified, but they sort of have, you know, put this curveball in there to make you think that Chekhov's gun, or a dagger in this case, has been fired. So therefore, you don't necessarily need to pay attention to it. So
it's pretty impressive, honestly, how they pull that off. Yeah, it's actually kind of like really insane how they're like, wow, they're still able to use somewhat good writing techniques when the show is kind of all but devolved into spectacle fare. It's interesting. I was like, yeah, no, there is still some pretty impressive writing here. Like I said, it just could have benefited from, I think, like I said, these last 3 episodes, I think the going consensus across these last 3 episodes is there is all great great stuff in there. It's just that because the story is so streamlined, it leaves a lot to be desired. It's like, yeah, I feel like if each of these last 3 episodes that we talked about had been like 2 episodes, I feel like we could have solved like all these problems. Because the thing is, like I said, it's what I've been saying since we started covering this most recent season, is that I feel like all of our problems kind of really do come down to nitpicks more than just legitimate problems, because for the most part, they're accomplishing
100%,
everything that they want to.
Listen, Dom, it's like we covered the first 4 seasons, and I feel like we were always talking about the sweeping sort of integration of all the characters and the stories, and how everything seemed to just have the right moments, and like it was just well tied together. And then the second half of the show, it's less so. It's more action oriented. The last 2 seasons specifically seem more binge worthy than anything else. So I think it's just a different style of show that sort of happened after season 5. Like season 5 kind of was good.
Pump the brakes there. Yeah,
I think they basically, after season 5 and the reaction to that, they basically sort of changed the nature of the show. And I feel like it works, and a lot of the characters that we love, and some of the storylines that happen in season 6 and 7 are fantastic. But I think they just leaned into this faster pace, this more blockbuster pace, this the
more blockbuster feel in general that comes from it.
Exactly. And I think you just have to be on board with it. And like, I know we on this podcast can't do it, but you need to stop like thinking about how it could be weaved together and just enjoy the action as it happens. There's going to be those nitpicks. Anybody that was there for the show at the beginning is probably going to have some later on in the series. But I think you basically should just be there to enjoy it for what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It's the thing that I've been saying since we started the show, which is that the first 4 seasons very much are still George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. And then season 5 is like this weird mishmash kabosh where it's like Benioff and Weiss are trying to like smash together the events, trying to streamline it, but they're still very much basing it off of George's material. The reaction to season 5 is, for the most part, or at least from the fans, critic-wise, it still did very well, but from the fans, the reaction to season 5 is for the most part very negative. So they kind of shifted course correct. And like I've said, the stuff that we get from the last 3 seasons is not all bad. But like I said, there is to be a very stark difference, pun intended, between Martin's Game of Thrones and then Benioff and Weiss's Game of Thrones. So much to the point that now Martin, who still claims that he's writing The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, states that he is purposefully rewriting the last 2 sections in the last 2 books in order to make it different from what we got in the show, which I'm like, hey, if we ever actually get the books, we'll see,
Hey, listen, it's all about the fans enjoying the world. And, with the HBO series, you got to enjoy it. And if George R.R. Martin gets those books out, and even if he does change and he's influenced and inspired to go in a different direction, you get to really dive into that world, and you're going to be comparing it to the TV show for sure.
Right.
But it's just going to be another excuse to dive into Westeros.
I think it's going to be one of the most interesting phenomenons ever, where for the longest time, it was the thing that was such a big part of this show's run during its early run was, how are they going to adapt this for the books? How are they going to adapt this for the books? The fact that the book readers were always one step ahead. And now, if and when The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring books do actually come out, it's going to be the reverse, where it's like, okay, now we're going to be reading this with this expectation of what we saw in the show already and how this is going to compare. Because like I said, there's still so many different characters that have been dead for years at this point that are still alive. Like Stannis is still alive in the books. Barristan Selmy is still alive in the books. Dario is still, for the most part. Dario, we are completely unaware. We could be dead. The Martells are all still alive and all very much taking an active part in the plot, Obviously, all the Greyjoys,
I'm gonna throw this suggestion out into the world, and hopefully our audience, there's an HBO executive listening, that might be a little too much to wish for, but what if you had a season of Game of Thrones that basically every episode was just a what if we put what's her name, Lady Stoneheart. What Game of Thrones actually brought that character?
So like a Marvel what if So like the animated show on Disney Plus,
Yeah.
What If, with the other multiverses, and we're like, okay, what if
what I'm
Lady
thinking
Stoneheart came in? What if Stannis won over Ramsay? And like all
Yeah.
the alternative what ifs to what we got in the show.
Well, no, not what ifs, but like, just what if you brought this in from the novel? The things that they didn't bring in.
Right.
What if you brought it in and keep it live action, hire the actors again, do these crazy episodes.
Ooh, I like that.
But like, just like, one episode where, Lady Stoneheart would be sort of the main focus, and, how it changes the dynamic of things. And, just like give us a little bit of that, like what could have been in the series, and not necessarily like, I know people have said, me specifically, let Zack Snyder do the 8th season again. But, there seems to be this general wish that they would redo the last season. But what if they just kind of gave us the series, but peppered in more of the books? And like, hey,
I'd be down. I'd watch that.
We could have done this differently. We could have done that differently. Right. And just give us a little taste of what Westeros could have been. Instead of just, come on, redoing the last season.
We don't need to read. Like, I will say this about the last season, is that problematic as it was, we still got it, and I don't want it to be remade per se, because the first one we got, it still accomplished its goal. Faulty as it was.
What's dead can never die, right? So the 8th season is dead. It can never die. Like, it is what it is.
Right. It is what it is. So in the meantime, like I said, after that segue, let's wrap this episode up. So as far as going back to Dragonstone, there's not really too much else to talk about here other than just the Theon scene. Like, I'm sorry. Like, talk about taking like from what was a really, really compelling arc. Like you said, you've been on board with the Iron Islands this entire season. It almost won me over between the Euron coming in and being the badass that he was, the attack in the second episode, Theon kind of like battling back and forth with his demons. He has this amazing scene with Jon afterwards, where he's basically asking for redemption, and Jon finally gives him the redemption that he's been and the validation that he's been seeking this entire show, because Theon's entire character arc has been all about, he's always been stuck between two worlds, whether he's Stark or Greyjoy, whether he wants 100%. To have all this honor, but he also wants to satisfy the father, but he also is angry because his father gave him up. And then he goes and does all of these terrible actions, that then suffers all of these horrific consequences for it. And now he's trying to redeem himself, but he just cannot seem to catch a break. And Jon, he has this amazing conversation where Jon says, yeah, you've done some horrible things, but nobody has, but you also have made up for them, And so you don't need me to forgive you. You have to find that within yourself. And for Theon, that's all he needs to hear.
Yeah, so perfect. Beautiful
send-off
scene. Right. Theon's arc is finally coming to an end. But there's one more thing that he has to do. And I'm going to tell you something. Like, I understand like what your argument is against this sequence. But this sequence had to happen, right? Theon goes back to his men, and he has to have a challenge to get his men's respect again. And, that has to happen. He just got atoned for by Jon. So now he has to go be the man and show us, the audience, that he finally is the leader that he was meant to, that he's worked past his trauma for the most part. And he is that man that's going to go and save Yara. That scene has to happen this episode. Where you have contention and I have contention.
Yes.
And I don't know how many countless other people have contention.
A lot. I can tell you right now, it's a lot.
This scene starts off perfectly fine.
But then I'm okay with how it starts.
Then we get Beavis and Butthead. It's like the directors of the show are just like, hey, what if we knee him in the balls 5 times?
And then we're like, oh wait, he doesn't have any more.
Dude, like it's just like, why?
What?
Just why?
Why do we need this?
You're just I'm just so like rooting for Theon, and then you have this immature knee him in the balls, like he doesn't have any, so that's the reason why he won. Like you're talking about undercutting the drama here. Like Theon's got to prove to everybody that he is a man and that he could do this. And this is his scene. This is like the end of the arc. We sat through all the seasons for this. And, forget what happens in season 8. Like, that doesn't matter. This is, like, him getting the respect of his men is the final piece of the puzzle for him finally being a full character. It's his arc. Whatever he does in season 8 is just icing on the cake. But they just, they knee him to the balls, and then they knee the audience to the balls too.
Yep.
And it's just, I don't know. It's a little too much for me.
Yeah, it was a little bit too much for me too. And you're 100% right. And that's ultimately the reason why this scene is so frustrating to me. It's not that the scene is poor in its conception. You're right. It is necessary, but it's like, this is the best you could have come up with. Him getting needed where his dick used to be. Showing is like, oh, it's like, I'm sorry, but like, are we supposed to believe that the metaphor, the message of this scene is, oh, he's stronger now without his balls? Is that what we're supposed to get from that? Because if that's the case,
if you're misreading that, Dom, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, come on, like, I'm not. I don't think I'm misreading it. I'm just going based off what the scene is telling me. Where it's like, oh, he's stronger now without his perceived manhood. Like, manhood comes from within, not anything external. Like, I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. But you still, we all know where this came from. Where it's like,
there's no intellectual metaphor in this scene.
There really is. It's just one of those things where, and if anybody thinks that there is, they're deluding themselves. So.
Listen, maybe he knees him once, and then Theon looks at him, and then Theon wins the fight. I might be able to tolerate that. It's the obsessive, like, the guy's like, oh my god, oh, he's not going down. It's a little much.
And then and then it ends with almost them half-heartedly saying, where it's like, well, I feel like we have to cheer for him, otherwise, we're all just kind of be like standing here for like silent for like 5 minutes, just trying to process what the fuck that is that we just witnessed. But Theon goes, he washes himself in the salt water, he's redeemed, and now he's another character.
I love the end of his arc.
Yes.
I just, I think it's too comedic what they did here.
Yes.
And it just doesn't fit the tone of what I expect.
Yes.
Specifically, how good that scene with Jon is just beforehand. So, I don't know. It's like, we have to live with it. What is done is done.
What is done is done. What is them may never die. And then we ultimately see him go off to die in the next episode. And we ultimately realize, oh, wow, guess the Iron Islands really weren't as important as they were being made out to be in this season. But let's wrap this episode and this season up with, oh, man, I feel like this is in contention with the ending shot. I mean, obviously, again, the ending shot of every season is always so important, not just the ending episode, but the ending shot. You go back to all the way, like counting it down, like season 1 with the dragons being born, season 2 with the army of the dead marching on the fist of the first men, season 3 with Daenerys being risen up by the slaves, season 4 Arya leaving in order to go explore lands unknown, season 5 Jon lying dead in the snow, and then season 6 Daenerys finally crossing over. Like the ending shot of each season is always so powerful and impactful. But if you ask me, this shit takes them all, because oh man, like the build up with Bran flying the crows up, and you see Beric and Tormund on top of the wall, and then you see the one dead soldier come out, and you're like, oh shit, they're here. And like, you kind of have a feeling that you know what's gonna happen, but you're just waiting to see it. And then when he flies out on the undead dragon, and like you see them fly by, and Tormund is just staring at it, trying to process what's going on. And man, they burn that sucker to the ground. Like, oh man,
dude, it is one of the best action sequences. And what I will say is, I'm kind of mad at HBO Max, because in the middle of the sequence, when the zombies are sort of walking through the wall, it immediately jumps up like, you have 5 seconds to play the next episode. And it's like, guys,
the episode's not done yet. Like,
there's like a minute left of them crossing over, the dragon flying in the sky. Like, I had to basically like fiddle with the remote, and boom, like HBO Max just totally, on my TV at least, it just sucked me right out of the moment. So I hope they fix that. I think it's some issue with the autoplay, like trying to skip you to the next episode.
Every single one of these streaming services that's not Netflix is just glitchy as all hell.
Dude,
so.
Yeah, it's like, but man,
oh man,
I guess that could be just me individually. Hopefully maybe it's my TV and HBO Max not just working together. But the fact is, it's that sequence is fantastic, and it gets you hyped, because
it's everything that we've been waiting for 7 seasons. We've been asking, especially this season in particular, but this entire season, the dead have been being built up and built up and built up. And the last couple of seasons, we've seen some really awesome and incredible displays of their power and just what they're capable of, between the hard home attack and the attack on the Weird Tree last season, and everything that happened last episode. But last episode, they got a big win when they acquired that dragon, and that dragon, this whole season they've been asking, they've been saying, okay, powerful as they're getting and as large as they're getting, like the wall will keep them out, the wall will keep them out. And That dragon, it turns out, was the key. Again, it is the quite literal, fully like picture realization of what happens when ice and fire meet. And it's a dangerous mix. And it shows it's like, yeah, what happens when ice and fire meet? It doesn't matter because the dead are still coming for you all. And man, that last shot of just them slowly crossing over and then the camera panning as the undead dragon flies out. I love the sound effects too, like that almost half gurgle, because obviously, because where the spear pierced it. So it still got that wound on its shoulder. So so the scream almost feels like way more guttural, and like it doesn't sound like it did when it was alive. And it's haunting to say the least. And like the imagery of the blue fire and burning through. Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah,
to say the
everything
least.
everything about it is great. It's just like it's time. It's
Yeah.
like Bruce Buffer from the UFC. It's time for your
Yep.
main event. The dead versus the living. It's coming. Basically season 8 is here, and they get right to it. It's not like they take care of Cersei.
I mean, they only have
first.
6 episodes left, so they're not wasting any time.
Yeah. Well, what is it? The Long Night? Is it episode 2?
The Long Night, episode 3.
Oh, 3.
Yeah.
So we got 2 episodes building up to it, but yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, it is a coming indeed. The dead have finally made their past arrival. 7 seasons. They're finally here. We're finally getting ready for it. And this is it, people. We have crossed the threshold. We are in the end game now. Only 6 episodes left of our Talkin' Throne show. It has been such a long time. It has been such an investment of time, but it has been well worth it every single step of the way. I wanted to just give a shout out to each and every single person that painstakingly watched us. We were on YouTube, has listened to us every week on Spotify. We're not done yet. We still have 6 episodes left. We're finally going to set out to accomplish what it is that we set out to accomplish when we first started the show, which is to figure out what went wrong. We've answered a lot of the questions. We figured out a lot of stuff, but we still have just a little bit more. So we hope that you guys will stick with us up and all the way up until the Iron Throne itself. Pat, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Hey, listen, I'm on Instagram. I'm posting every once in a while, so you'll see some photos on there at Patrick W. Huber. That's my handle. That's kind of where I'm posting right now.
Yes, indeed. And of course, you can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to also follow the official Talkin' TV podcast across all platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of the above. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitch. New episodes of the podcast are uploaded to Spotify and Apple Podcasts every Monday. New episodes of Talkin' Thrones, the final 6 episodes of Talkin' Thrones, will continue to be released every Friday all the way up until the grand finale. But until then, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.